Welcome to Calm Sleepy Tales, and tonight's story, The Magic of Macarons, a Parisian tale of flavour and flour. Bienvenue to the heart of Paris, where magic isn't found in spells or fairy tales, but in sugar, almond flour, and a whisper of lavender. Join us for a gentle story set in a small macaron shop nestled near the Champs-Élysées. Meet Madame Colette Beaulieu, a master baker whose legendary confections capture the memories of those who taste them. From loyal regulars to curious tourists, from storms to lost friendships rekindled, this is a tale of flavour, family, and finding sweetness in the everyday. Settle in with a warm drink and let the soft Parisian breeze carry you into la Magie du Macaron. Beneath the Parisian sky. Paris stood slowly awake beneath a blanket of morning gold. The Seine glimmered like a ribbon of silk, weaving its way through the heart of the city. Along the banks, cafe chairs were being unstacked. Flower vendors arranged roses in metal pails, and the smell of warm bread escaped from the boulangeries in delicious little clouds. In the distance, the Eiffel Tower stretched into the waking sky, its iron silhouette softened by the morning haze. Tucked between a quiet side street off the Champs-Élysées and just a short walk from the Arc de Triomphe, stood a small, elegant pâtisserie with an emerald green awning and gold cursive lettering, La Magie du Macaron, a name whispered with reverence by food critics and Parisians alike. The shop was known for its impossibly delicate macarons, tiny colourful discs of almond meringue with rich ganache centres, each one a perfect bite of joy. The shop's owner, Madame Colette Beaulieu, was something of a legend. In her 60s now, with her silver hair always tied back in a silk scarf and her blue eyes sharp as ever, Colette had spent her life mastering the macaron. She had apprenticed in Lyon, studied in Strasbourg, baked in Bordeaux, and perfected her craft in Paris. Her recipe was a secret known only to her and her silent notebook, bound in plum leather, tucked beneath the counter like a holy book. Every morning, Colette arrived at 4 a.m. Her shop, closed to the public until 10, was her sanctuary in the early hours. She moved in silence, the sounds of the city not yet stirring. She greeted her copper mixing bowls with the fondness of an old friend, tied her apron, and began to work. The macaron shells began with the same sacred trio: finely ground almond flour, aged egg whites, and powdered sugar. She sifted, measured, and folded with precision, each movement as smooth as ballet. The key, she believed, was patience and intuition. The oven, preheated to precisely 149 degrees Celsius, waited patiently as the first trays slid in. The macarons rose with their trademark feet, delicate and smooth on top, slightly chewy inside. She filled them later with her handcrafted ganaches: raspberry with rose, pistachio cream, salted caramel, Madagascar vanilla, chocolate infused with orange blossom, and her signature, lavender and honey. Every month she debuted a new flavour. This month's was Earl Grey and black currant, inspired by a rainy walk past the Luxembourg Gardens and a quiet afternoon tea. By 9:30, the queue had started to form. Locals in crisp trench coats, tourists following sweet-scented air, delivery cyclists grabbing a box for later. The shop opened its doors at 10 sharp, and the bell above the door jingled with the same gentle charm as always. First in line was Monsieur Thierry, a retired professor from the Sorbonne. Every Wednesday, he bought a single coffee macaron and sat by the window to eat it slowly with espresso. This macaron, he once told Colette, is a poem. You bite and you are in Montmartre, 1962. Next came a pair of tourists from Tokyo, eyes wide and camera ready. They had read about la Magie du Macaron in a travel blog. They each chose 6 flavours: lemon basil, raspberry rose, lavender honey, pistachio, chocolate orange, and mango passion fruit. Their smiles said everything. Oishi, c'est incroyable. Then came Isabelle, aged 8, wearing her ballet tights beneath her coat. She came with her father every Saturday after class. She always chose the pink one. Raspberry, please, she'd say. Colette had started shaping little hearts into the shell, just for her. For some, a macaron was more than a treat. It was a time machine. One day, a woman from New York entered the shop and selected a lavender macaron. She bit into it, paused, then began to cry softly. My grandmother grew lavender in her garden in Provence, she said, tears in her eyes. This tastes like summer, 1985. Colette simply smiled and nodded. That, she thought, was the real magic of a macaron. It wasn't just sugar and almonds. It was memory, emotion, a tiny bite of something lost and found again. Colette's flavours came from life. A falling leaf in the Tuileries garden might inspire cinnamon pear. A spring walk past the Notre-Dame might lead her to try pear and elderflower. A summer thunderstorm would bring out dark chocolate and sea salt. Every Sunday evening, when the shop was closed, she would sit on her tiny balcony, sip a cup of tea, and sketch out flavour ideas in her plum-leathered notebook. She never followed trends. She followed instinct, curiosity, and the rhythm of the seasons. Her flavours were crafted with artisanal ingredients: Sicilian lemons, Corsican honey, Tahitian vanilla, Parisian creme fraiche, hand-picked berries from local farmers. One Tuesday morning, an envelope arrived with the emblem of Louvre embossed in gold. They were hosting a gala to celebrate a new Impressionist exhibit and wanted to feature Colette's macarons as part of the culinary experience. She was flattered, but not surprised. The Louvre had always supported art, and macarons, in her mind, were edible art. She created a limited edition Impressionist collection. Monet, blueberry vanilla with a swirl of pastel blue. Renoir, strawberry cream with pink dusting. Degas, hazelnut mocha with a deep chocolate ganache. Cézanne, green apple and thyme. They were displayed on mirrored trays beneath soft lights at the event, where guests whispered in awe as if the macarons were paintings themselves. It was late spring when the missive arrived, again in gold-trimmed paper, but this time bearing the seal of the prestigious Michelin Culinary Society. Their Paris chairman, Chef Lucien Marcon, wished to visit Colette's shop personally. He had heard whispers, tasted one of her macarons at a diplomatic reception, and insisted on meeting the woman behind them. He arrived on a rainy Thursday, dressed simply in a charcoal coat and linen scarf. No entourage, no fanfare. Colette greeted him with quiet dignity. "You came for a macaron, not a performance," she said with a wry smile. Lucien sat at the corner table. Colette brought out a tasting platter, one of each currant flavour. He tasted each slowly, thoughtfully. After the final bite, a delicate bergamot creme, he said simply, "They are exactly what the world needs more of. Balance, surprise, and soul." He offered her a collaboration, a seasonal showcase where Colette would create a special macaron course for the Michelin Society's summer gala. She agreed, but only on one condition: no changes to her process. The macarons were to be made in her kitchen, with her rhythm, her silence, her heart. Lucien bowed his head. "Then it will be perfect." That same week, Colette received an application. Handwritten, clumsy French, from a girl named Juliette, aged 19, from Marseille. She wrote, "I bake to feel less lost. My maman died 2 years ago. We used to make macarons every Sunday. I want to learn. I want to do something beautiful." Colette saw something of herself in those words. Juliette arrived the following Monday, clumsy with piping bags, too hasty with the folding, but earnest, wide-eyed, and curious. Colette taught her, not with stern lectures, but with examples, gestures, and the occasional raised eyebrow. They worked in silence. Colette would make a batch. Juliette would try. And slowly the shells became smoother, the fillings richer. They invented a new flavour together, fig and rosemary, inspired by Juliette's childhood summers in Provence. It was an instant success. One dark afternoon in November, a terrible storm hit Paris. The Seine flooded its banks. Windows shattered across the arrondissement. A tree fell onto the corner of Colette's building, damaging the shop's front window and caving in part of the ceiling. She stood in the wreckage, silent. But then Thierry arrived with boards and nails. Isabel's father brought pastries to keep them going. Juliette cleaned the glass. Even Lucien sent a team of restorers to help. The community Colette had fed for years now rose to feed her. It took 2 weeks, but when the shop reopened, the queue was longer than ever. And that day's new macaron, smoked vanilla and pine, strong, a little wild, full of hope. Colette rarely spoke of her past, but one evening, Juliette found her sitting on the balcony, holding an old photograph. It was of a man with laughing eyes, her husband, Etienne. He had passed nearly 20 years ago, a violinist. They had met at a street performance by Notre-Dame. He had bought a macaron, pistachio, and stayed for a lifetime. That night, Colette made a batch of new macarons, green tea and cherry, his favourite tea, and the fruit from their honeymoon orchard in Burgundy. She named it Etienne. It became a permanent flavour, quietly listed at the bottom of the menu. One winter morning, an old man entered the shop. He wore a coat 2 sizes too big and walked with a limp. Colette looked up. "Pierre?" she whispered. Pierre had been her childhood friend from Montmartre. They had once promised to open a bakery together until war, family, and life scattered them. He had spent decades abroad, and now he returned with little more than a suitcase and the address of a pâtisserie he'd heard about from a traveller in Morocco. They spoke all afternoon. She made him cassis macaron, his favourite. From then on, Pierre came every Sunday to sweep the front step, sip coffee, and remind her of their childhood dreams.